Hi, Brian. Yes.
How are you?
I'm fine, and how are you?
I am fine.
Yeah, I can see that was joined.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I'm here. I hope you can see me well. I can see you well. There's no problem.
Yes, I can see well. You can see well. Yes. Oh, you are doing PowerPoint presentation or you just be talking?
No, no, I'll be talking. But for my computer,
Oh,
yeah,
it's fine.
okay.
Avuxeni.
Tatani Khosi,
Ahee.
minjhani ku pfuka?
Hayi pfukile minjhani?
Hi, pfukile man.
Wonderful,
Wonderful, wonderful. I can see kuna Funanani na iPad. Brian, you will tell us when we're ready.
Yes. I think let's just wait a little bit, possibly
Okay.
for the next 5 minutes or so. Let's see how we can move. Colleagues, it's just 2 minutes after 5. May I humbly request that we wait just for 5 minutes, and in the next 5 minutes, then we can start.
Hello.
Yes, Chichi, how are you? Chichi, how are you?
No, I'm very good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. We just had given one another 5 minutes so that we can, at 7 past, then we will start.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be on mute.
Thank you. I think the 5 minutes that we requested to wait has elapsed. I think this just gives us an opportunity that we need to start. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is an opportunity that we have that we need to have this conversation on the role of the SMMEs in the new South African economy. I think without wasting much time, I think we can ask Kujo, are you there? So that she can open this session with a word of prayer. Kujo? She's not there. Charmaine, may we request you to open this session with a word of prayer?
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this day, your day, Lord. We rejoice in it, my God. We give you all the praise, all the glory, all the power. We acknowledge you, Holy Spirit, because you say in your word, where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, you will be amongst them. We invite you to guide us in this meeting, our deliberations, and let them be all for your glory. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. This is a conversation, should be our 8th one now. This conversation we have been hosting, this conversation under the banner of intergenerational wealth creation. And we have understood that as long as we pursue intergenerational wealth creation, there is nowhere where you cannot talk business. And in an environment where we find ourselves now, I think you and I can agree that the SMMEs are an important part of our rejuvenation, of our economic reconstruction and recovery, as the president has said on Thursday. It's an opportunity that you and I that are in the SMME sector, that we come together and begin to discuss how best do we contribute in this journey where the flattened economy need to be reconstructed, that which was lost need to be recovered. That is a space that you and I, we have it and we need to stand and do our part. This afternoon, we have our guest. Many of us, we know him. His name is Tevusile Matebula. I know him personally for a very long time. During student days, we were together. In as much as he was studying at the University of Venda, I was at the University of the North. We continue in this journey. He joined State SA in Gauteng. And when he left State SA, we continue to work together as entrepreneurs out there in the market. I can tell you, you'll be able to enjoy this afternoon because the type of questions and the issues that we'll be raising are the issues that us in the SMME sector, we are supposed to engage with. These are issues that are critical for us to be able to succeed in the SMME sector. There is one thing that you and I need to know. Unless we collaborate, unless we cooperate in the SMME sector, there will be a challenge of success. there is an adage that says, if you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to collaborate and cooperate with others. And without wasting much time, I'll hand over this time to Mr. Matebula so that he can then engage with us on the role of the SMMEs in the new South African economy. It was deliberate that we called new because the old is no more. Even if you want to resuscitate it, it's nowhere. You can try it, but efforts will be lost. Over to you, Mr. Matebula. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Greetings to all those who are in the platform. I would like to thank Mr. Ndo to have invited me to come and have a discussion together with you in this time regarding the role of the SMMEs in the new economy, or what we call revitalized economy, or the post COVID-19, even though we are not yet over, economy. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge all people who are available. I've been requested by Mr. Ndo to simplify the whole thing, just make it more simple. Me and him, we talk a lot about the economic terms. He said, no, let us simplify that. Everyone who is a participant should then understand what we mean by SMEs and the new economy. We've seen actually the past 2 days, the president has presented to the country a new plan, which of course, each and every country in the world today is actually presenting a new plan on how to revitalize the economy. Let us just go back to what you call the establishment of the World Bank, the IMF, or what is called the Bretton Woods institutions. After the great economic depression of almost 1938, 37 to 1939, actually from 1933. The world economy collapsed at that particular time. And we are almost at the same situation that was faced in those times when there was a meeting in the Bretton Woods where it mooted actually the establishment of the World Bank and the IMF was discussed. Then with COVID-19, we have seen that in just 200 days in South Africa, it has caused a havoc. We've seen the statistics South Africa has actually indicated that the unemployment, it has gone beyond 50%. We, in the coming few weeks or months, will see how so many people have lost jobs. So far, it is estimated that more than 2 million people have lost jobs. We have seen how families are destroyed within the 200 days. We've seen how companies are struggling to move forward. We have seen the government has actually come with economic stimulus, what is called relief to small businesses, relief to unemployed people, various measures to make sure that there is an economic activity and there is survival for the entire population. But before we start, and just want to give this analysis a little bit, let's go back to the presentation of the 500 billion stimulus. Then let's concentrate much on the 200 billion which has been set aside to help a small business. But very interestingly, which also is problematic Fortunately, the president has said they need a feedback on that 200 billion. That 200 billion is a guarantee scheme that needs to help businesses to kickstart and move forward. When the president reported, he said it has helped only almost 11,000 businesses, and the money which has been distributed is about 16 billion to 45 billion. And the reason why the money is not going down to the businesses is because they've requested the banks to distribute that money. And the banks, they have their own criteria that exclude so many businesses. And if it is not changed, then small businesses will not benefit out of it. Then we'll come back to it when we deal with the issues for small business and the new economy. Firstly, I would like us to define and understand what is SMMEs, because sometimes we might be talking about the terms that we don't even understand what does it mean. We'll agree that the SMMEs in South Africa, it is defined per Schedule 1 of the Small Medium Act of National Small Business Act of 1996, which give the definition. I would like us to go deep a little bit, understand what it means. It says that a small business, it talks about a small business. Small business is a separate and a distinct business entity, which include cooperatives, enterprises, non-governmental organization, managed by one owner or more, which include its branches or subsidiaries, if any, and is predominantly carried on in any sector or subsector of the economy mentioned in column 1 of the Schedule 1 of the Act. I think we need to revisit the Act and check it. Then the SMME, we know that it means small, medium, small, medium, and micro enterprises. Then in South Africa, what does it mean? It has what we call divided it into number of categories. Category number 1 is called a survivalist enterprise. This type of enterprises are people like workers, vendors, subsistence farming, those who have less minimum income, which is according to poverty line. They run the business to survive. People who sell in the trains, who sell the street, they sell in order to buy food at home. Tomorrow, they call it a survivalist enterprise. Then the category number 2 is called micro enterprise. The micro enterprise is a business which has maximum of 150,000 rands turnover per annum, which mainly they're not even registered for VAT because they may not be registered for VAT. These types of businesses, there are some of them that are not even actually formally registered. For example, spaza shops, running your own taxi, a small industry where you don't even have more than 5 people. That is called a micro enterprise. Then we have what we call very small enterprise. The very small enterprise is the business which is defined as in it does not employ more than 10 people. And it does not include businesses which are in mining or manufacturing or construction. If the business does not have more than 10 employees, but it has a turnover of more than 150,000 per annum, is regarded as a very small enterprise. Then in the same act, then it defines what we call small enterprise. This type of enterprises are businesses which employ a limit of 50 people, which are generally in a very small enterprises in the manufacturing, but it does not have more than 50 people. A minimum of 50 people is called a small enterprise. Then we come to the last category, which is called the medium enterprise. The maximum number of employees is 100 or 200 for mining. And these enterprises are mainly categorized in various sectors. In mining, they can be in construction and so on. Then in this regard, we then have an understanding of what is SMMEs. Then the next step that we need to deal with is to say, then yes, we have an MMEs, but what is the situation in South Africa and the economy in terms of the small business? We call it a small business then in that regard. The number one, what are the challenges in South Africa, the South African economy before COVID-19 and post-COVID-19? Number one is that we have economic growth that is low. We know the economic growth in terms of what the total production, the GDP, is very low. The economic growth is very low. And two, the most critical economic problem is high unemployment. And then we need to check these two things. They were there before COVID-19, and they are there. There will be a problem as well when in terms of the new economy, if things are not addressed properly. Then what is the challenges of the South African small businesses? Firstly, the whole world in developing economics or powerful economics, then we have realized that the small business or SMMEs, the MMEs is South African defined, but in the entire world is called small business enterprises. We have realized that in the economy, like in Ethiopia, in West Africa, and other developing, in Ghana as well, in Zambia, the small business is the key job creation, not in South Africa. Then when you compare South Africa in other countries, the small business is the job creation. And in the entire world economy, small business contribute about 60 to 70% of the working population. But in South Africa, it's far less, it's almost at 28% of the working population that is employed in a small business or SMMEs. Then let's come to the next point. With the small business we have in South Africa, what are the characters? what is the character of the small business? We defined it, but what is the character? When we talk about this small business, what type of things are happening there? Number one, we realize that the small business in South Africa is undertapped in terms of its opportunities and in terms of how it can contribute and strengthen the economy. There are quite a number of opportunities or interventions that has been placed to develop and strengthen the small business in South Africa. One of those are called supplier development programs. There are quite a number of funding means that have been placed. There is also cooperations and skill development that has been invested in developing a small business. But all those interventions, until now when we have COVID, they have not yet created a situation where we can say small business in South Africa has a significant role or a meaningful role in the entire GDP of the country. The National Development Plan, which you all know, it has set an ambitious goal that by 2030, which we'll see, and also which the president has indicated in the past 2 days, that 80% of the GDP of the country will come from small business. That's something which we need to talk about. 80% of our GDP will be mainly be coming from small business. That's what the NDP. I don't know whether the NDP is a plan or it's just another, when you read it, or it's just it's something which is written, but with something which is there is an ambitious thing, and the president talk about it. 80% of what it will be coming from there, and 90% of the planned 11 million new job creation, 90% of it will be coming from a small business, SMEs. But there are some challenges. According to Stats SA, in the 2019 unemployment, more than 27.1% of South Africans are unemployed. That itself is a challenge. And now we know that based on the COVID-19, the unemployment, it might be far more than 50% based on that. Then, what are the other challenges we have? According to SEDA, South African Small Enterprise Development Agency, and the Small Business Institute, in 2019, South Africa had 250,000 SMMEs, those who are recognized. I think this data, it is collected through South African Revenue Services, SARS. But very interestingly, we look at South African economy, 56% of jobs, of all people who are employed in South Africa in 2019, they were employed by 1,000 employers. And out of the 1,000 employers, mainly is government and big corporations. Then small business in South Africa is not a major employer. And it's just because based on the economic structure and it's based on our educational system. We know, some of us who come from the historical Black institutions, in all during the graduations, And when you get your degree, first thing, even when you call the guest speaker during the graduations, they will be talking about how are you going to be employed, and not how are you going to create jobs and how are you going to start the small businesses. Then SIDA again, it indicates that small business in South Africa, it is not growing. Since 2005 until 2018, they've realized that small business in South Africa, it is not growing. What are the reasons why the small business in South Africa is not growing? There are quite a number of businesses, a number of reasons. Reason number one, it is indicated as a challenge. One is funding. Access to funding, it's a problem. Even though South Africa is leading throughout the continent in terms of venture capital, in terms of private equity, in terms of grants, and in terms of financial agency to help businesses, but 87% of small businesses that exist in South Africa never had an access in terms of funding. Let me repeat, 87% of small businesses in South Africa never had an access to funding. And then remember, if we have 87% of small businesses that never had access to funding, which means these businesses will not able to contribute to the economy. These businesses will then will not be able to survive. You can read the report by Mark in 2010 about the whole access to funding for small businesses and their challenges. Small business in South Africa is self-funded. It's money borrowed from friends, money that people save from their pensions and retire, start their own businesses. It's money that is borrowed from family. To a certain extent, some of the money come from machonistas. And that's one of the greatest challenge that small business they have in South Africa. I'm talking about 87% of the small business in South Africa. And it further indicates that SIDA, about 60% of small businesses that started in 2012, they could not survive more than 24 months. The business starts, and in 24 months, the business is no longer continuing. People are disillusioned, number one, because there is no funding. There is disillusion because the money which they've borrowed from machonistas or whoever, it's then swallow the whole business in terms of the returns, and it leaves so many people in debt, and most of them they go back to seek formal employment. Then when you read a report by Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which is called GEM, it indicates that South Africa has the highest failure rate in the world in terms of startups and small business. Let me repeat that. Global Entrepreneurship Monitor indicates that South Africa has the highest failure rate of startups and small businesses in the world. And as I indicated, most businesses fail within the first 24 months. The next challenge from funding is what you call business management skills. Then CEDA again, it indicates that out of the what you call the 13%, the 87% of the enterprises that they could not be funded, one of the reasons why some of them they could not be funded is business management skills. They found that some of the businesses have prospects of funding, they have good business plans, but they could not even produce financial documents or able to prove that there is access to their what do you call bankable. They are bankable and the affordability to approve their funding. Then, which means most of small businesses, they don't keep their financial records. Most small businesses, they don't audit their books. Most of their businesses, they don't have accounting systems. And most of their small businesses in South Africa, even the bank account, it's a bank account which is used for personal use and also for business. They can't even separate such kind of things. Most of the businesses don't even have any record in terms of how they operate. The other challenge that has been raised is that small business in South Africa cannot get proper skills. There's a problem of skills. Let me explain the skills we're talking about. It's so very interesting that in South Africa we have high unemployment, but every day or now and then there is what you call adverts for jobs and they cannot be filled. And that's the same situation which is faced by small businesses. Skilled people who are skilled, who can be employed in small businesses to help small business to prosper, they're not there. We have a high demand of skilled people and a low supply. And most of the skilled people, they are taken by large corporates. For an example, we have the IT people, we have people who can help you in finances, people who can, therefore a small business cannot employ a highly skilled person. Then when we go to the law of supply and demand in economics, we know that and now because the demand is high and the supply is low, what happens is that even when the skilled people are available for small business cannot afford to take them because they are expensive. Then we have a challenge of skills that in the society that lead to a high failure rate of small business and makes a small business not able to contribute effectively in the economy. Then what is required based on these three factors that I've raised? Issues of funding, issues of the business management, and issues of skills. One of the critical aspects that need to be in place, I know that the government has done a lot, is more on intensive work need to be done in monitoring, in coaching, and training of small, medium enterprises. Then, because if we do not have small businesses that have people who run them, they're well-skilled, they're well-trained, we'll continually have a high failure rate in small businesses in South Africa. it's good to have an idea, but it's you need to turn that idea into a business. It requires a particular skills. Then the other item that need to be done, I know that it has been proposed as well in government, is what we call a regulatory framework or regulatory environment of small businesses. You'll agree with me, South Africa has one of the highest demand for small businesses to comply to the regulations. One of the regulations is ASARs. You have the compensations. You have to do issues of quality, to those of quality, issues of safety. There's so many regulations that small businesses need to comply. And some of the challenges that have been identified is issues of compliance. You start a business and in 2 years you have not made any money, but there will be so much money which you need to pay in terms of compliances. And then if you don't comply, the business will not even operate, even though no matter how much skill you have, no matter how much you can offer. But if you fail to comply, then the business is not going to operate. The other item is the issue of the labor laws. We know that South Africa, we have what we call the minimum wage. We have the labor law. You know, the labor law in South Africa, it applies to, when you talk about employer, is an employer. Whether you're a survivalist, whether you are a small business, small enterprise, whether you employ 1,000, whether you are a multi-employed thousands and thousands of people, the labor law in South Africa applies the same. And that is a challenge that small businesses in South Africa is facing, because it's facing a challenge that if you employ people, I've interacted with a number of small businesses, they say, fine, I can employ someone on a permanent basis, but if things are not going well, it's going to be a challenge for me to lay off that person because of the laws of the country. You have small businesses that, for example, those who operate small shops like in eateries and so on, where during the day it's not busy, you'll start to be busy in the evening. And then you have the working hours that are set according to the labor laws. And then you need to employ people, you need to pay people even when the time when you're not even making money. There are quite a number of challenges that are faced by small businesses that need to be addressed in order to make sure that small business is able to participate and effectively contribute to the new economy. Then the biggest question, what is that for a small, medium enterprises in the new economy? And what is this new economy we're talking about? Let's go back to the 200 billion, which has been set aside, that the president has also indicated that small business actually, okay, first, what is the problem with that 200 billion? Firstly, that 200 billion, it's not even in line with the definition of small business according to the Act, because that money is said to help business, it's not even categorized. It's 200 billion, and they indicate that any business which has a turnover of 300 million, it can apply. Therefore, even a survivalist business must apply. Even a man who's employing 5 people, it must apply in the same port. The regulations are the same. I mean, if a business is making 300 million, definitely that business, in terms of compliance and all issues, it will be fine compared to a business where it's a spaza shop, a business that you need to run employing 10 people, it will fail some of the conditions. some of the things that the banks have said, I mean, actually they've given the banks, South African banks, the 4 banks, the ABSA, FNB, Standard Bank, and what else? What's the other bank?
Thank you.
Yes, all those 4 banks. They've given them the right. Actually, when you go to COVID-19 loan scheme that is guaranteed by government, firstly, when you apply, they're going to check the credit bureau. They're going to check before we have COVID-19 in March, your check account or your bank account never had what you call refer to drawer. How did you manage it? Actually, you see, this is the problem. We're using the past in order to address the future. We're using the banks, using those types of impediments, because those are some of the challenges that small businesses in South Africa are faced. Because if you then say this business in the past 12 months, it had two debit orders that has been returned, therefore you don't qualify for the relief, which is a government guarantee. It's not their money, it's the money of the government that is said to be to revitalize the business. What do you say? We mean that the same businesses, large businesses that benefited in the past, and predominantly the white businesses that are going to benefit out of the 200 billion. And where is the share for small businesses? Where is the share for the businesses that operate in the township? Where is the business that operate in the rural areas? What is that the government has set aside for these small businesses in order to revitalize the economy? The new recovery plan, it was supposed to ignore like what happened in the 1939, the Great Depression or economic depression. It's supposed to ignore how things were done in the past. Supposed to have to say, fine, we have people with ideas. It is time to say the economy is shaken, and all those rules and regulations that frustrated small business in South Africa to grow and to contribute to the economy, now is the time to make sure that these businesses operate. I've made a proposal. Say one of the proposals that to say, let's get down and say, let's break down the 200 billion and say, let's consider the businesses. If you then an act can then define that the business that makes 150, a maximum of 150,000 per annum is then recognized. Why don't we have set aside out of the 200 billion, particular billions that this is going to help small businesses that they have the maximum returns in the past 12 months for 150 million rand? Why don't you categorize and say this money is going to help businesses that employ 10 people? Why don't you categorize and say this money is going to help the businesses that help employ 50 people? Why do we have an act, but when we're supposed to revitalize the economy and help, then we don't recognize such kind of a structure of our small businesses? And that is the failure of the new, or what you call the new plan, recovery plan. If then it is then now our role to challenge the president. He has invited us, challenge us, because the money is not the money is not distributed. I mean, if they've said about 200 billion and it's not moving, it's now only 40 billion which has been set aside, and it's only 11,000 small businesses that benefited. Therefore, it is clear that this money is earmarked for certain elites or certain businesses, and it's not going to help other businesses that need to contribute to the economy. The NDP, I will talk about the national development plan because what the president has outlined is mainly what is contained in the national development plan. The South African economy, for it to grow according to the Stellenbosch group in terms of the alternative economy, we need to have 5 to 7% economic growth for the next 7 years, consistently moving so. And we've heard the president shared a lot about imports and exports in terms of the entire Africa. That if we can have 2% of what is exported, what is imported by Africa in other continents, and that comes from South Africa, then it can create a lot of jobs and it can contribute significantly to the GDP of the country. What does that mean? It means that the new opportunities for small business in South Africa is to do production. Mr. Ndo knows very well. I want to give you an example. One, we are in what we call the fourth industrial revolution. It's more of the economy which is driven by technology. I just want to show you I shared this with Mr. Ndo last week. Let me share with colleagues again here. When you look at the cell phone industry, according to Statistics South Africa, 97% of South Africans own 1 or 2 cell phones. Do we agree? All of us here, we might be owning a minimum of 1 or 2 cell phones.
I have 2.
Yes. Then we say, let's assume that we have about 20 million, or let's say 30 million people in South Africa own cell phones. Then we'll say, let's say multiply by 1.5, which will have almost 45 million cell phones. And those cell phones, which we buy from game, wherever we buy, most cell phones within a year, the screen is damaged, or the battery is not working, or whatever. And then we go and get the Pakistan and these other people who repair our phones. And most of those people, they don't even use what you call a card. And the average amount you'll pay there, let's say, is 400 rands for the battery, for a screen, and so on. Then if we say in a period of 6 months, then we assume that about 10 million cell phones have been repaired. Then you multiply the 10 million rands and the 10 million cell phone gadgets, you multiply by 500 rand which you pay, you have about 5 billion rands in the economy that has gone for the repairs of cell phones. And 99.9% of those people who are repairing cell phones are not South Africans. Then when we go back to the issue of the challenges of small business in South Africa, is the issue of the skills. We know that we're in the fourth industrial revolution. Everyone is owning the phone. Actually, a phone is a must. If you don't have a phone, people are still surprised. How do you survive? You can't even survive. Then we talk about 5 billion rand in 6 months. In a year, we talk about a 10 billion rand. That is going to small businesses that are not owned by South Africans. That money you're not even sure that is rotating in between the South Africa, or that money is going out of the country. While we have young people, more than 35 to 45% of youth in South Africa unemployed. We do not have young people who are trained to repair actually, I hardly see any black, small, whatever repairing shop by a black person or South African, because we don't have those skills. And that is a challenge. I mean, those are actually, I need us to look at some of the challenges that the opportunities are there, but these opportunities are taken by other people who are not even contributing directly. That money can't even go into it. Actually, they don't need swiping. They don't bank that money. We don't know where that money comes from. We don't even know whether those materials are used in their bodies. Actually, there's no any very chain which you can establish in repairing those faults. Therefore, those some of the challenge, some of the things that we are facing in our small business. Therefore, if we have such kind of the setup, while in our revitalization of the economy, we don't talk about how do we make sure that we take about 10,000 or more young people, we train them how to repair their phones and make sure that we're no longer going to allow people coming from outside to come and do such kind of business. While people, I mean, it's a business that people need to be skilled locally and run their own businesses and create their own jobs and spend their money within the country. And then it contributes towards economic growth. And then the money circulate among ourselves. That's one challenge. The second challenge is production. I stay in Spreadview. I'm part of the, what you call Katoras. Katoras is more of Katlehong, Tokoza, Fosloras, the whole area. We have a population of about 225,000 people as per census 2011. We have about 125,000 children who are going to school. Okay. Then in the cultural side, let me just focus on our children who are going to school. Where do we buy the school uniform? We're talking about 125,000 kids who are going to schools in the Katoras area. Then every year we buy them shoes. Where do we buy the shoes? We do what is called the school bags. Where do we buy them? School uniforms, additional stationery. How much money is being taken out of a black community to the other side? Because we don't produce. We don't even produce our own bread. We don't, actually, when you sit down and check the entire structure of the economy in the black society, there's nothing we should do in terms of production. Then one of the challenges that we face into revitalizing of the economy is more on production. Then when you talk about production, we need to look at the consumption. For an example, in a day, we consume almost 8 million chickens a day in South Africa. And out of the 8 million chickens that are consumed on a daily basis, I'm not talking about a week, or we're talking about a day. Out of the 8 million chickens that we consume, either through Nando's, Chicken Licken, the ones the dry packs, well, the ones we buy at ShopRite Checkers, you know, I don't know how many of those chickens are produced by Black people. Therefore, in terms of small businesses in South Africa, we are not there in production. Then, what are the challenges that we need to address in order to make sure that a small business is able to survive in the new economy? Number one is to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution. And two is that the NDP or whatever, we need to make sure that we buy from a small business must support a small business. The challenges we have now is that we don't support each other. The small business is either it will go and buy in the large corporate. Even though there's someone who's producing local, you can't buy from him. And we rely on buying from other people, and then we destroy the other small businesses we have. We've seen that the eradication, hopefully the eradication of how the tender system in South Africa is made in government, that it was created for the few and those who were dominating through the zonal commission. You can see that it was only few people connected were able to go through a government tender system, because the government, you like it or not, is the biggest procurer of goods and services that can sustain the small business. But much as it is in government, we need to intensify that small businesses need to be paid on time. Because one of the things is that you find a small business has supplied the government, and the money is locked through the bureaucratic tape, business is not paid, and then most businesses collapse. And actually, one of the studies which need to be checked is to how many small businesses that collapse because government could not pay them on time. I just want to not take long, but say that in the new economy that the government is talking about, one of the things that need to survive the economy is the resuscitation of small business, taking advantage that we need to work together to make sure that we, like the bank, like the cooperative banks, because one of the things in South Africans is that we don't have a team work. We work as individuals. You look at how the people come from Ethiopia, they come as a group. We are not together, we are individuals, we don't share information, we don't help each other, and that is a challenge. The new economy that we are facing is not the economy that is going to be driven by big companies. This is the economy that small business is going to survive. Remember, when many people are going to be unemployed, the only way to make sure that we survive these things is to make sure that small businesses, they grow, small businesses are sustained, small businesses are able to move forward. Then in this regard, I just want to pause and have discussions, because I might be getting more to number of issues that could be critical before we lose each other. In this respect, Mr. Ndou and the colleagues, I will say to all of us, with the new economy, it's not something that is when we want to take it in bigger terms, it will confuse us. But what it means is that all things have fallen. There is no longer hope on big businesses. We may not have, at the moment yet, felt the impact of the COVID-19, but some of the things will feel them after 18 months to come. Then the challenge that we face now is to say, how do we take advantage of the economic stimuli that the president has actually indicated that is available for us? And what can we do? Because as individuals, there's nothing we can do. What we can do is to work as a team. Perhaps as a cooperative bank in making, this is also the time and opportunity to make some presentation to the president in terms of how this plan is going to work. But at the moment, to tell you the honest fact and how things than is not going to help small businesses. The infrastructure expansion that the president is talking about, the trillions that are talking about, there is a risk that it might end up being developed by people coming from China, because we may not be organized and having skills in that regard. I just want to pause here, and then we have discussions, Mr. Ndo.
Thank you, Mr. Matebula. You have said a mouthful. It does look like there are opportunities. It does look like there are challenges, but the opportunities seems to be outsmarting the challenges, which is something that I like, and which I will imagine even the people that have joined us this afternoon, they will be able to appreciate, I mean, just a talk of the cell phone example that you have made, a talk of the uniform or our school-going children, what is it that they require? The issue, I think when you were closing, you summed it well when you were saying the new economy is not looking for individual success, because such success might not be available. The new South African economy, particularly at the level of SMMEs, it requires team effort, it requires collaboration, it requires cooperation. And I think that is what we need to talk to. And as people are colleagues here in the conversations, if you have got any question and you have got any comments to make, here's an opportunity. You can just raise your hand and we engage on this topic. SMMEs throughout the whole world, they are hailed as big contributors to employment creation. And Mr. Matebula has just said here, the amount of people that are employed in our South African economy, they are not employed by SMMEs, but they are employed by either government or by big corporates. That is an indication that there is a space for us as SMMEs to contribute. And that is why I think that you and I, in this conversation, we need to start thinking. We cannot afford as SMMEs, like Mr. Matebula said, the president has challenged us. Now that he has challenged us, let's also throw back the challenge back to the president and begin to say to the president, how do we access finance to enable small businesses to succeed? When he started, he said 87% of SMMEs do not have access to funding, which means they are supported by angel investors, they are supported by either friends and family, by those that you can trust. But is it the best way to grow the new economy in South Africa? I think no, but the president is waiting for us to come back and say, Mr. President, you have thrown the challenge to us. We have thought through. This is how we want to throw back this challenge onto you. And if you have got any question, I think the opportunity is now for you to raise those questions. You do not necessarily have to only ask questions. You can also contribute because it's a conversation. This is a conversation to enable us. I mean, in Gauteng, as we speak now, there is the Gauteng Township Economic Development Bill that is now under consideration. The consultation are on, it's only going to close on the 30th of September. And many people are worried that it seems to be saying they need to be set aside for locals. Some are saying, are you not discriminating? And when they say so, they are basing their challenges or their arguments on research in other parts of the world. But you don't even have to go very far. Just our neighbor here in Botswana, they've got the set aside. You go up north to Ghana, they've got set aside for locals. You go to Nigeria, they've got set aside for locals. You go to Ethiopia, you go to Kenya, all these other African countries, there might be very few that do not have set aside for SMMEs. And that is a challenge. Many people are saying Gauteng Economic Township Development Gauteng Township Economy Development Bill is going to discriminate. Is it a fair discrimination or is just what? These are challenges that we are facing as SMMEs. And if government is the biggest buyer, what are we saying? Should government not procure from SMMEs the 30% that the president said will be bought from SMMEs, women and youth-led businesses? How are we going to hold government to account that indeed that money has gone to SMMEs that are led by women, that are led by youth? But if we are not producing anything, are those small businesses led by women and youth, won't they be fronting for the big producers? Because it will just be going and buy and sell. And someone asked recently, as the president was talking about the economy, someone was saying, why are people that have got big tenders, they have also not managed to produce? Why do they get these big tenders? The only thing that you can see that this person has a big tender or at one point got a big tender is because after that tender, this person has bought a big car. Why didn't that person manage to invest that money into production? It's because the markup, unless you are corrupt and the one that are giving you the business, they are corrupt, it's almost a 15 to 20% markup, which therefore means that if you have got a 1 million rand tender that you need to supply and your markup is 20% or 15%, effectively out of that 1 million that government will pay you, you will be left with 150,000 rand. And that 150,000 rand, if you are corrupt, the likelihood is you might even be expected to pay either 10 or 15 or 20% of that 150,000 rand before you even talk profit. Now, that's the reason dependence on tenders for those that are tendering is very high. But if we go production, far better because we are able to gauge our markups in those different areas. That is a challenge that as SMMEs we are faced with, but it's not for me to only converse with Mr. Matebula. It's for you and I to engage. What are the solutions? I mean, Minister Didiza is availing 896,000 hectares of land in the 7 provinces. As long as we still have our mouth and our stomach will be eating, what does it mean for you and I in the SMMEs in as far as primary agriculture and agro-processing? These are challenges that we need to face head on, but we need to face them collectively and cooperatively. Any hand that anyone is raising to begin to contribute to this conversation and bring forth that which we need to use to challenge our president. We cannot afford to be bystanders, ladies and gentlemen, not in times such as this. The new South African economy will be ruthless to bystanders. You have heard the president saying, by the way, in the next 3 months, if you are receiving the 350 rand through SASSA grant, it's coming to an end. Are you a survivalist SMME? What is going to happen? Because these are challenges that SMMEs are going to be facing. If you are depending on the 350 rand from SASSA, in January next year, what is going to happen? Because you will not have that grant. Can I see by a raising of a hand, or you can unmute your microphone and begin to contribute to this conversation? We need to be able to find a role for the SMMEs, Mr. Matebula. And part of the contribution I think you have raised to say, from the definition of the SMMEs, why don't we categorize out of the 200 billion, how much money goes to the survivalist, how much money goes to the micro enterprise, how much money is set aside for the medium and the small enterprise? And unless we go with such proposal, there might not be any challenge that anyone will take back to the president. And we might keep complaining that we are not being supported, and others might keep complaining that foreigners, I don't like using the word foreigners, particularly when it's refers to our African brothers and sisters. I call them economic migrants. And for a purpose, because time and again, those people, anything and everything that they're doing, it's about sustaining their family livelihood in their own country. Mr. Pule, your hand is up.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Mr. Masibule, thanks for the great presentation. I think, Mr. Ndo, as you pose a question, what comes to mind speaks to, for me, the challenge that Matebula spoke to say, if we look at the biggest challenges that SMMEs have, that then speaks to funding. So, and maybe it's a couple of thoughts that come to mind to say, one, if we do not have the factors of production, so we don't have funding to get our businesses up and running or to sustain them, as he spoke about the 24-month turnaround time where companies don't make it. But also too, I kind of reflect on maybe the businesses that currently exist in our townships. If you think of the supermarkets, your big retailers have taken that over. So Checkers, ShopRite, or Pick and Pay, they've really infiltrated that market. We have spoken now about the Pakistanis. Then we look at the hardware stores that they've also taken over. So again, we are not at a level of production because all our daily consumption needs are looked after by other people. And maybe we also need to think about the businesses that we actually get into, because again, where there is no cooperation within our businesses, if I open up a fruit and veg shop here today, the person who sees me tomorrow will do the same thing. So instead of collaborating, we are still wanting to compete at the very low level of the businesses that we are starting. So I think, I, as you say, it's about understanding that there's such a big pie that we are able to really play at, and how do we really start tapping into that particular space. But I don't know how, if we don't own the banks that must fund us, it does also pose a problem or an issue when we need to then start playing in those spaces. So I think, again, if we own it as a start, and I don't know if it's too far, but to say, if we own the banks, or have a financial institute that will really be focused on saying, how do we support Black businesses? How do we get into those spaces? On a production level, I don't know how big the red tape is when it comes to production, because what has happened to the factories that South Africa used to have? Are we getting materials cheaper elsewhere? So again, maybe it's why are we no longer in those spaces? But that is my comment there.
I think, Khumutso, what you raised can best be answered through this slide that we have made at GCI, wherein we say, I mean, most households, this is almost their monthly vegetable groceries. Most households, they spend almost about 850 per month on their vegetables and their chicken. Now, just guess what? If you have got 100 people that are cooperating in that vegetable production, that person who is producing onion, potatoes, beetroot, carrots, cabbage, and chicken, you are on a monthly basis, you can be getting about 85,000 Rand. And if you multiply that by 12 months, it's over R1 million per annum. But if you get to 1,000 of members collaborating, which is what will make a lot of a difference in our production, in our agricultural production. If you just only get 1,000, on a monthly basis, your turnover will be about 855,000 Rand. Annually is about 10.2 million. This is exactly what those that want to collaborate and those that want to cooperate, they will be able to see what these numbers does. And when we're making this slide, we just realize each one of us, you eat one bag of onion per day, one bag of potatoes a day, one bag of beetroot a month, not a month, sorry, not a day, a month. Cabbage, possibly one or two, tomatoes, one box, live chicken, the chicken about 10 in a month. And that's how much money will be made. But where is that money going? It either goes back to the retailers, the big retailers, because we are not producing ourselves. And if we do not produce, this is a challenge. How do we monopolize on the township market that exists? Can we be able to use conversations of this nature? Or what other form of conversation do we need to engage in that will enable our people to do what Mr. Matebula was saying? Small business must support small businesses. Because if this is what the production is all about, what is going to happen? We can be able to see, if you look at that red line below there, this is what one pyramid scheme managed to do in 58 days during COVID time. They managed to recruit about 230,000 members, contributing about 180 rand. In 58 days, they have collected 44 million rand. You look at that money, you say there's no money in South Africa amongst our people, you are really joking. The truth of the matter is there is money. It's only that we are not investing or we are not using it where it will generate more money or where it will generate more wealth for ourselves. Mebadu, your hand is up. You can unmute and also be part of this conversation.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, GCI members, what Mr. Matebula has been saying in terms of the president's initiative, I see ourselves as lobbyists as well. He raised some few issues, the uniform, what the Pakistanis are doing within the community. Why is government not targeting the SMMEs that are employing 5, 10, 15, 20 people? It could be one initiative that we could present to the government. And I suppose if you could do that, we could close your eyes. A lot of SMMEs would support that proposal to say, can they readjust the funding to be appropriate, to fit into the current situation that we are sitting with? Secondly, in terms of issues of production, the typical example of cell phone repairers. I don't think the skill of telephone fixers, mechanics, or it's a rare skill. It can be trained. Does the government know that if it can train these people, it will be job creation? More shops of telephone users will be opened in the local communities. 3, our literacy programs that we are enrolling today, very soon, I imagine so, is that we could start when we educate the community, we can shift the mindset of people that are refusing to support each other. Where does self-hate originate from? Why is it that Pakistanis are loyal to each other, they support each other? They start by teaching them the language. Their shopkeeping skills are not Greek. All they do is they learn the language of the village, then they start doing it. So why can't we educate our own people? If you start with community and say, guys, let's talk about why you don't want to support your spaza owned by the next door, and you support the parking. Why is that his prices are cheap? Perhaps that could also knock on the mindset, and maybe within a year or so we can start monitoring how much shift has happened where people are voting with their feet and then supporting Black businesses. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Badu. I'm not sure if Mr. Matebula, you want to make some comments as we await some few hands on the basis of some of these comments that Humutso and Badu have made.
Yeah, thank you very much. All those who have actually contributed. I think Sis Badu has said that we need to be much as is in a cooperative banking in making, but the issue of lobbying is very important. I've raised 3 issues that are critical in small business and why small business in South Africa fails. One of that I said is management skills, issue of funding, that is giving us problems. But you see, the South African environment, you go through all the research in terms of how small business in South Africa survive and why it fails. It goes back to the issue of how those who are in policy making or those who are in the institutions that are created to support small businesses, they don't even understand small businesses. You know, you have people who have never run any business and they say this person is going to support small business. Then one of the things which we have seen is that most of the agencies or whatever government initiatives in terms of funding or helping small businesses, that money end up in paying rentals because they're going to posh offices, very expensive offices in Santins, very expensive offices, and huge offices that most of them they're not even addressing small businesses, and a lot of money goes to salaries and payments. And a little money which is supposed to be there, it goes to training, but it does not have an impact. We don't even have a monetary mechanism in the country to say, how do we monitor? Let's, for example, in the youth, we have what do you call the NYD, National Youth Development. Yes,
NYDA.
we had so much from Ntsika, we had in Gauteng, we have Gauteng Enterprise Propeller. We have so many agencies that have been created to support the small businesses, but then those agencies, they just die. Those agencies, there is not even a tangible result to say this is an impact we've made to our people. Then the second aspect that we face is to say, if really the new economy or the new plan, we want small business to play a critical role in the country, is to say, how do we value a small business in South Africa? What are the problems? One of the challenges we face is that, let's go back to the 200 billion. The 200 billion they just gave the banks, you know, an open check. Because the government just said, no, use your criteria to fund, to help the business. I mean, how can the government say to the banks, use the criteria? Who owns those banks? Because to tell you the honest fact, I even heard some of the white counterparts who says now is an opportunity because for the past, the Black economic empowerment, it derived as this is our time to eat. This is a time to be empowered. Therefore, the whole economic stimuli which has been created, it is there to benefit a white business in one or another. Because you can't say to the bank where the government is a guarantee. Because when it says the government is a guarantee, it says that if you fail to pay that money, the government will pay it. Therefore, some of the businesses will be deliberately fail. They will just take the money and deliberately fail. And the government will pay, and that money will not have benefited those who need it most. And those who need it most are black businesses, those who need to survive and take an advantage of COVID-19, a distraction to say, when we rebuild the economy, we no longer consider the past, we consider the new things. Then you cannot let the banks decide. And that's a big mistake they've done. And that is why they've decided to say this money is 200 billion, is for any business with the maximum turnover of 300 million. How many black businesses are here making a 300 million turnover? If a business, in the regulation or in the act, it says the business is recognized as a business which makes 150,000 rands per annum, and then you want to put that business in the same criteria with the business which is make 300 million. I mean, how many times then the 350,000 goes into 300 million? Therefore, there is something which is wrong that our president need to take it up. We need to make sure that perhaps let's make a presentation, let's act, because this things affect us, affect the small businesses. We need to address it. Otherwise, we'll just know that there was a 500 billion which was there to revitalize the economy. It will just something we heard about it, we talked about it. It will not have helped us at all. It will not have revitalized the economy. It will not have been transferred to the Black community and particularly small businesses. But the other challenge I raise is the issue of management. How do we make sure that, I mean, we know you can be a good person in this, for example, in agriculture, but you may find that you lack finances. I mean, the reason why businesses are not funded, according to them, say that no, we can't convince them. Much as if you can have a good business plan, but when they come back and have the track record to say, how do you manage your finances? You can't even avail documents. There's a lot of work which need to be done according to the South African environment to say, how do we make sure that we capacitate small businesses, that they're able to manage their businesses properly? They have the management accounts, they're able to have, whatever you need, you can produce. And what beats us with the white businesses is that when you go to funding, they can produce whatever they produce. With us, we don't. We just swipe. You go and pour petrol with a business card, you go and to buy, bread. It's such kind of skills are critical. But the most important aspect is government, the thinking of government. People who are employed to run those agencies, do they understand the plights or the frustrations of small business in South Africa? Then we have people who live in posh houses, their performance management is not more on how many businesses they've survived, because they are getting paid. If then 87% of small businesses in South Africa has never received any access to funding, or about 70 or 87% of the businesses they fail, then why do we have ministries or agencies that support small businesses? What is the performance management to that? What do you say? What are we saying about it? Do we really want to run down the country to fail the small businesses? And we know that small business is the biggest employer. Small business contributes significantly to the GDP of the country. And in order to have a revived economy, for an example, we didn't want to go deep into economics, but you realize that now our debt to GDP is almost at 85%. Then in terms of our budget, the biggest portion of the money which is allocated is the repayment of the debts. And part of the 200 billion is going to be the debts that we're going to pay. Remember, that money is a stimulus, but who's going to pay it? You and me, and the money which never even benefited us, which it means that small businesses in South Africa will never survive, will never able to contribute to the economy. Will always Black people, their role, it will be employees, or there will be supply of labor, and their businesses will fail, and they will not even benefit out of this stimulus. Because currently the only benefit that people talk about is the 350, because it's 350 majority is Black people, it's 350 rents that they're receiving on a monthly basis. But when you talk about a small business, which is the critical part of it, we need a report from the president to say, out of the 11,000 which he's talking about, how many are the businesses coming from the township? You may find that not even a single Black business is received from the township. Thank you.
Any hand? We are almost closer to the end of our session. You don't want to leave without even saying a word, because this is us sharpening one another. Iron sharpen another iron. SMME support another SMME. This is the time, this is an opportunity, and we cannot afford not to go without beginning to contribute that. Mr. Mudise, Kosi. You are
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think mine it's a question. I just want an assessment to find out where things really went wrong. As Matebola has correctly stated, that you cannot take me who has not run a small business and then they be in charge of it. But here's a scenario now. We have a black-led government which is supposed to be pro-poor. And then within that government also, maybe we also have a president, who we suppose should have business acumen. And then we have a ministry which is supposed to be looking after the interest of the small business, the SMMEs. And then, and then you have advisory bodies, which are supposed to take care of sectoral interest. Where do you think things went wrong? Because the sentiments that are being expressed here as I am listening, it's what everyone else should know. It's what every Black person should know. It's what every poor government should know. Like the example of the funds, the billion rand funds that has been put aside. How, who were the advisors and how did they advise in terms of the small businesses? I mean, who safeguards the interest of the small business, the vulnerable businesses in our community? And yeah, I'm just puzzled listening to say, how do we miss, I mean, in terms of people that are running the show, how do they miss this? How can, maybe as a way forward, how can we rectify the situation in terms of making sure that the people that are there are the people that may have the interest of the small business at heart? What is the, there are different forums. We even have I'm just throwing this, the Black business forums, the Black councils. What are they saying about this? What is their agenda in terms of, empowering the small business there, which is the future of the economy? Yeah, I think I'll pause there. So many questions, but no answer.
Thank you, Kosi, for the questions and some of the things we can't even answer. But my contribution is that, when we took over in 1994, South African economy has been driven by big business. And there has not been so much acknowledgement of small businesses. But what we have seen is that much as the South African government, we were pushing more of the what we call the foreign direct investment, making sure that the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, I mean, it has grown, but it has not translated into real employment. And we come from a history where a Black community, they were only focused as the supplier of labor. Very few Black people were in businesses. And that has been carried over from in our government, not recognizing the value of a small business. Actually, when you are saying I'm in running my own business, it was more of saying this person does not have any option. Maybe he's not employable, or maybe there's no any alternative that this person can do. That is why he is in business. We have not actually embraced that small business is so much significant in creating jobs and making sure that it contributes to the economic growth of the country. And the emphasis in the policymakers, you ask the question, why we never evaluated that? It goes back to the issue of monitoring and evaluation. We have the office, we have that in the office of the president. But you see, there are quite a number of schemes which have failed. We have Finsika, we had all these schemes, they failed. One scheme failed, we create a new one. Another one failed, we create a new one. Just like the plans we have, we move from one plan to another, GIA, GISA, we move from one level to another. There is no consistency to say, this is where we want to go. And if we set targets, for example, in CEDA, you look at the targets. If set targets, if those targets are not met, I will only to go back and say why these targets they're not met. And this other point is the issue of the banks. Banks have more power in South Africa. And we know the history. For example, the history of the credit bureaus, which have been used in other countries. Small businesses, if you run a small business, you don't go through the credit bureau. In South Africa, if you attempt your own business and fail, then that failure, it becomes your undertaker. You wherever you go, you'll be referred back to say, but you have failed. You know, and that failure is not a lesson to say this person as an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur does not become successful in a day. You try so many things and you fail. And you can trust someone who has failed in business that he has learned a lesson and he can do better. And the reason why businesses fail, we can't continue to say 87% of businesses fail in the first 24 months, and we don't recognize or maybe challenges to say, but why this business fail? Because there's no support of business. There's no support of government. It's more on talk, and there is no evaluation, and we don't see the impact. Maybe now with post-COVID-19, that's where we need to talk about small business. How do we make sure that small businesses in South Africa is going to contribute effectively? And it does not need government, it needs us. How are we organized to challenge things like, for example, the 200 billion? We need to challenge it. We can't let the president, because he spoke about it in the first time and the money, there was no movement. When we move into the level 1, he spoke about it, there's no movement. He spoke about it 2 days ago, there's no movement. And I've checked with all the banks, is those stringent conditions that people are not getting money. They don't consider whether you have employed people, whether the business exists, whether what you say is the due diligence. It's the due diligence. The first due diligence is to say a bank account. Firstly, if your account in the past, from past 12 months, you had a overdrawn faith. Before you can even check what type of business are you in production, how many people do you employ, and those are the things that I want us to challenge the president now and say, President, this is not going to work. If you're going to get the banks determine how the money should be distributed, that money will not help us. It will be the money for a particular individuals who purported to be running the businesses well. But those who have ideas, real ideas that will change the situations, they are not supported. I think that's my contribution. I don't have answers, Kosi, but this is the challenges faces us in the post-1994 situations that we need to tackle and move forward and say, how do you address our situation as a country? Thank you.
Charmaine, possibly as you are unmuting, Charmaine, can I have another hand that is meant to come so that we can recognize the hands that needs to come on board, and then we can quickly then come towards the end of the conversation. Is there any other hand except the one that I'm seeing for Charmaine? If there is no hand, let's allow Charmaine to raise her question or make a contribution. Then we can sum this conversation and then chart the way forward. Charmaine, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think mine is more of a comment rather than a question. I'm not even sure if I want to speak really, because I might just come from a point of disillusionment and despondency. I have long lost confidence in our government. And I'm not saying we shouldn't interact with the government. In fact, if you see there, I've put a note for everyone to say, Mr. Matabula, thank you very much for such a concisely, well-researched and insightful presentation on SMMEs. You have really empowered us. The presentation was powerful. But the thing is, I don't understand how we can still be thinking that government is going to come through for us, guys. In the past 26 years, you know, most of the things that Mr. Matebula has said here, they were said in 1994. The fact that SMMEs throughout the world are recognized to be instrumental in creating jobs, all those things, we've had them over and over and over again. And you take examples of countries like Singapore. They built their economies on SMMEs. Why we can't just follow suit? Why we can't just... So I'm very despondent. And where I'm sitting now, for me, it's about just saying, guys, let's do it for ourselves. I know it's hard, I know it's difficult, but we should be in the mode of uzenzele. Our forefathers and foremothers used to do it during the height of apartheid. One of the reasons I've joined this organization, Global Change Investors, is because of the fact that I believe in stokvels. I believe in stokvels. With or without tapping into the 20 billion, I believe that if we focus on what our organization is setting itself up for. I was even despondent last time to say on the WhatsApp group, do we really want to apply for that land from government? Do we really want to? So I don't want to be talking from a point of doom and gloom, because I'm not a despondent person by nature, but I'm very realistic. I'm very, very realistic. Can really our president and the whole of the people who advise him give money to banks and say they must, and not prescribe criteria to them? It doesn't take a rocket scientist. Mr. Matabula has been articulating it very brilliantly, what needs to happen. It does not need a rocket scientist to understand that if that 20 billion is given to those banks and things are done the way they've been done in the past, we're not going to get a cent from that money. But I want to encourage those of us who still have the energy. My energy is really reserved for Uzenzele. That's why even this week, I sent a message to the chair. I said, when you are going to our farm, I was very excited to see those bulldozers, those tractors on the farm there that we own. I was very excited. My energy will be reserved for that. But people who still have energy to be engaging with government, good luck. Thank you.
Yes, Charmaine, we are receiving the blessing and the luck that you said, good luck. I think it's important, Mr. Matebula, you can sum it up in your concluding remarks. Charmaine, I think one of the things that makes us to continue to talk to government it's not because government will give us everything, but government has the machinery to create entrepreneurial environment that is critical for conducive business development. If we do not engage with government, we might miss an opportunity for us to begin to contribute in changing some of the areas that are critical. I think Mr. Matebula, if not one who commented, says, but no, I think it's Mebadu. She talked of that what stops us from lobbying government. We are not going to government with a begging bowl. We are going to government with an approach or an attitude that says to government, why punish small business with onerous regulatory regime, wherein for everything that SMMEs need to do, they need to pay. We go to government and say, let's categorize the SMM, the 200 billion, or the remaining, or 30 billion. Let's set aside 30 billion of the 200 billion for the truly SMMEs and go with proposal for survivalist, micro enterprise, medium and small enterprises. If we were to use this criteria and remove the stringent one, do this one, because this is what you are guaranteeing. We can be able to stimulate the new South African economy. That is how critical it is. Some of the incentive, I mean, the president talked about incentive, tax incentive that have been given to companies or to businesses. Of those that have been, that SARS has advanced to, what is it, to businesses, which ones apply to SMMEs? Can we engage the commissioner, Mr. Keith Streeter, and say, Mr. Commissioner, you have not gone too far in terms of leveraging or pulling up these ones. Can we go to trade and industry and say, these people that are blacklisted in the, what is it, in the credit bureaus, can each case be treated on its merit, where these people exploring businesses or they were blacklisted out of negligence? If it's out of negligence, because some of the black people, or Africans in particular, they get blacklisted just when they come out of university being happy, they go into debts. They've not even yet understood how money works. They are just seeing friends buying cars and all that, and then they get blacklisted. Can they be given a second chance? What will it take for Africans and Black in particular to be given a second chance around credit bureau blacklisting? I mean, you have talked about the financial literacy program that we want to run as GCI. That program seeks to make sure we generate an understanding where are our African entrepreneurs and Black in particular in relation to these dynamics, the regulatory regime, the tax regime, the funding regime. I mean, we are in the process of establishing a cooperative bank. What will it take for us to be able to start contributing? Possibly the government was supposed to have given us a portion, possibly R1 billion or 100 million, and test us and said, can you be able to disburse this money? What are the type of criteria? Even when we go to government, can't we go with a proposal, test us with 100 million and see if we have put the following, the following criteria and the following support mechanism. I think Mr. Matebula talked about coaching, mentoring, and something of that sort. He talked to something in that area. If we were to create a package that we take to government and say, government, give us 100 million of this money. We want you to test us on this thing. Let that money come through the following. These are the milestones. We send a proposal, but we don't send a proposal to bureaucrats, because a number of them, when you send the proposal to them, they change the name. Mr. Kosi, one of the things that's making this business not to move forward, or SMMEs not to move forward, a number of those, as Mr. Matebula has said, a number of people that are meant to support small business, they have never run even a single business in their life, which therefore means the first day you bring a proposal, that's when they begin to understand how this business look like and what will it take for this. And that's why a number of those proposals, if it's a brilliant proposal and they look at it and it's brilliant, they can tell you it's not successful, but they give it to their friends to go and implement. Some of the brilliant ideas some of us have sent through, we have seen them being implemented, but who are you? Do you have enough cash to go into litigation with government or with the municipality or with the provincial government where you have submitted your proposal and it's then given to someone to implement? These are the challenges that we have as SMMEs. And unless we come together, cooperate, because when we cooperate, we go far. When you go as an individual, you can go fast. That's why many of those that are fast, within 2 years, as Mr. Matebula has raised, they are collapsing. But this is an opportunity. The new South African economy, as Mr. Matebula analyzed it and given us some of the pointers, it allows us to engage directly. And I don't think we need to be despondent. Charmaine, this coming week, we are going to our farm and we are going to put it in practice. The bulldozers have cleared the bush. We can plant. I'm hearing some thunder, some noise outside that says rain is coming. We are going to plant something in our land. And I think that's an opportunity that we have. Mr. Matebula, in your closing remarks, do you mind to sum it up and give us the matching orders in as far as the role of SMME is concerned? Because we want to get into a space where when we engage the small business development minister, it's factual and it's research-based. When we go to, the Reconstruction and Recovery Council, let's go with something tangible. I'm more than glad. I've almost filled 4 pages in front of me as we're speaking. I can show you. Here it's one. Another one is this one. Another one is this one. And the last one is this one. You see, I have 4 pages that I filled that have got issues that you raise and that can enable us to engage people at different levels. But we have got a role to play as SMMEs. Over to you, Mr. Matewe.
Thank you, Mr. Ndo. The clear point is that for the country to move forward, we need small business. But what I want to put here is that the most immediate, I know that we need to respond to the president. I want to put a proposal to say to the president, put 50 billion out of the 200 billion aside that will go directly to the small business. In terms of the category, then we can categorize it. Let me give you an example. If it's 50 billion and each small business get 200,000 rands, will service about 250,000 businesses. Currently, they say it's 11,000 that has benefited. And we say, okay, give us 50 billion aside, we target businesses in black areas, then we'll then service 250,000 businesses and each getting 200,000, and that will be making about 50 billion. And we say these businesses are the businesses which employ 5 people. And then when we put that money to businesses that employ 5 people, we'll have saved employment for 1.25 million people. Then how many businesses that are given that money can create a 1 million? Because we're talking about creation, because we need to talk about figures here. Because small businesses are small, but because of the scale, they can employ more people. They don't need a lot of money. They need money to kickstart. They need money to start the production. They need money just to say, we're out of COVID, give us money that for the next 2-3 months, I'll be able to move forward. Then this money must be given based on the condition that the business is existing, the business, it can survive, not based on the conditions which are set by the banks. that are not in line with productivity, that are in line with how much the banks are going to make money out of it. Because out of this money, a lot of money is going back to the banks. And the banks, you know, in South Africa, they're the richest institutes, entities in the country. And none of those banks are owned by Black people. But as a proposal, let's go to the president. We need these guys since June until now, they failed to distribute 200 billion. They've only distributed about 40 billion. Set aside 50 billion for small businesses. And we see we have 250,000 compared to the 11,000 which they have. That is my contribution at the moment. And thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's possible to close it. It's almost 7 o'clock now. We have taken 2 hours instead of hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes. It's because of our passion in what we are talking about, and we want to make a meaningful contribution. We should be inviting you in the next few weeks, possibly on the 14th of November, in the next conversation that we'll be having. Get ready for the 14th. We want to contribute as global change investors, including that area where there is no access to funding. We want to enable what will it take for the government to even entrust us with that 50 billion. Even if they don't give us the 50 billion, Mr. Matebuli, let them give us 100 million. Let's disburse it and get it back. You have run State SA finance in Gauteng. The budget for the census, when was it? 2006 census. Which year? You are muted. Which year did you run the census?
2001 and 2011.
2001 and 2011. What was the budget for Gauteng for the census?
No, it was almost a billion.
It was almost a billion, which means we can disburse R1 billion. Let him trust us with 1 billion. We'll use that which you used to disburse it in Gauteng for the census, where you touch almost everyone across South Africa. And let's see what is going to happen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Do not forget to fill the attendance register. It's an opportunity. Thank you for coming. We are going to make a meaningful change in our country. The Reconstruction and Recovery Action Plan requires us to act and with speed. Thank you, and the conversation is adjourned. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.